Welcome to the blast zone, or the pulse. There goes the helmet. And if that didn't tell you that the pulse was dangerous... So yeah, if that shockwave hits you, you're dead. It'll vaporize you, like a normal shockwave would. Now the question is, what is producing the pulse? Didn't time that quite right. Now here's the point that disturbs me about the fact that you needed 20 of those drone bodies in order to open the door to access this area, because you'll notice that all the people bodies seated in here are crash test dummies. Which suggests to me that perhaps those guys were here for maintenance on the facility or something, but it's also possible that they were intended as a more organic test. Now, of course, you get acquainted with the fact that this door protects you from the shockwave, but note that light. That light denotes the ending of a railing. If you're between those two lights on this door and the shockwave hits, you get sent flying into oblivion. You don't want to jump straight down there because you'll be out of timing with the protection relative to the shockwave. And some nice hope spot music as the shockwave fades into the distance. Yeah, like I said, what a cool concept to just have this periodic explosion. Now, the reason why I think it's a reactor is that I think it's probably a fusion reactor, and it's probably a pulse detonation inertial confinement fusion reactor of some description. So every time it undergoes a detonation, we get a wave like that. So presumably the containment on it is compromised, and the pulse detonation is actually bursting outside of the reactor. Unfortunately, this elevator ride does not take us away from it. In fact, we can actually see it now. The faster you get the door open, the better. Bail on that elevator. Yeah, the child is a little shooken up. That was not a fun elevator ride. Unlike these cubes, which I really think it's unfortunate they don't actually exist. I'll have to stand on a little rocket-operated cube. This might kill me with a fall. Probably. Oh, there we go. just... Oh, great. More water. So we need to trigger this one. Wait a few seconds. Trigger this one. Catch it at a higher position. It's like we did when we stacked the other one on top of that small crate in the previous area. Now we can get a lot more air out of this one. That is a very bad sign. And it's after us to boot. Obviously, we want to get as much distance from that thing as possible. So... Oh, wait. This one actually has something to get up to. Let's do that. Now we can really get some distance and get some depth while we're at it. Now, the trick here is to buy time by using yourself as a lure. Very careful at the end of this hook. You don't want to come off completely. But you have to dip into the water. I'd say that's far enough. That was dangerously close to full-on drowning. One more, even though I probably could have made it with that one. And there's an aha moment. Now, this is another one where you're supposed to do something, back off, and then head back, because there's a button that we have to press to open the door to escape. But we also need to shut the door behind us. The problem is it takes time for the door to do both, and time for us to swim to it. So if you try to bail on this run, the creepy water child just follows you into the next room and kills you. If you try to shut the door when you initially open it, it'll slam in front of you, and the water baby will catch up to you and it'll murder you. But we have another collectible to, well, collect. First by luring it over there, and then we can ascend. Yoink. This room is safe, as established. Swam in here before. And now we make good our hasty departure. Kind of allude to what's going to happen here. And we're caught. That air hunger starts to kick in, lungs are burning, and you get a lung full of water right about there. And that's drowning. Now, if the length of this protracted death scene isn't any indication, yes, this is scripted, this is supposed to happen. Now, of course, the question might be raised, where do we go from our main character drowning to death? Note that it's after we get that, whatever that is jabbed into us, that the water baby just decides to casually drift away. Fire goes taut, whatever that is runs out of juice. The umbilical is yoinked. The fish take a disturbing interest in us. What have they been eating, being the question on everybody's mind? Ah, VHS tapes. Funk. We live! And now we apparently just breathe water. There's other strange effects from that little encounter. Trust me. And again, this isn't something that you would normally expect to find in the ocean. Those are staircases. This is all inside of a building. Like I said, something cataclysmic happened on this world. And I use the term cataclysm specifically relating to its general nomenclature as relating to water. So again, we get a yellow cord. That clearly indicates that there's something on the other side of this wall, but we can't access it from over here. But it is important that we keep that in mind. And that's a body hooked up to an umbilical floating in the water. And we're going to have a really disturbing moment in a second. Not alone down here. So right now we just keep paddling. You know, it's a fascinating concept to me, being able to breathe underwater. I understand that, you know, Mammalia can't do it because water-breathing creatures have a number of adaptations, not just for... Because you don't technically breathe water, you breathe diffused gaseous oxygen in the water. So technically, fish breathe air. They just absorb air from the surrounding water, and what causes fish to die on the surface is not actually a lack of oxygen, it's the fact that gills are extremely fragile. Okay, hang on. This is how we access it. First, we have to unlock it by pulling this sucker out. And then we can actually give this a twist. Basically, gills are an incredibly soft tissue because they need a higher porosity than lungs in order to absorb the small quantity of diffused gaseous oxygen in seawater. The problem with that extraordinary porosity is they lose moisture at an alarming rate. Now, that's not an issue if you're just in the ocean. You're surrounded by moisture, but on land, gills desiccate. They dry out. That's another yoink. On land, gills desiccate and dry out, and then the creature suffocates. They don't drown in oxygen. They suffocate. But that's the interesting part, because if you were to put fish in, say, an isolated quantity of water that didn't have access to gaseous oxygen, and didn't have, like, algae or other oxygen-creating microorganism, planktonic life like in the oceans, they would actually drown. Or technically suffocate. Because, again, they absorb oxygen from the water, but if there's no oxygen in the water, they don't actually breathe water. Now, that bit of hard science out of the way, what fascinates... One of the issues with, well, actually, the hard science isn't out of the way, I'm not actually done. So the issue is that creatures that came on land and began breathing just, like, gaseous oxygen from the atmosphere, when they return to the ocean, and I'm specifically talking about, like cetaceans, like whales and dolphins, although dolphins might be delphin, I don't know. I'm not a speciesist, or a marine biologist. Point is, when those creatures return to the water, they continue to breathe gaseous oxygen. Why? I mean, if they don't return to the surface, it's basically a death sentence. Well, yes, but here's the thing. The energy you can extract from gaseous oxygen, like, on the surface, is much more than you can get from the diffused gaseous oxygen inside of seawater. So those creatures can have far, far better metabolisms, provided they make the compromise that they need to return to the surface periodically in order to breathe. Now we're near another collectible, which involves this thing right here. We want to put it in the vertical position first, because what we're after is actually on the opposite end of this upper arm. But we gotta go down below to get it. Now, how do we get down below? Well, you might have noticed the child sort of slipped into the water while walking through this mud. There is actually a dive point here. Now, if you just kept holding right, figuring that he tripped, because it looks like he did, because he did, it's not like he can see the fact that the ground underneath him suddenly disappears. But you may have completely, not even noticed that there was actually a dive point down there, and that's another plug pulled. So yes, the mammals that were land dwellers and then returned to the sea retained their breathing of surface oxygen because it can sustain just a better metabolism than absorbing oxygen from seawater. Fish, crustaceans, they all need special adaptations in terms of their biological energy economy in order to accommodate just the lack of breathable oxygen that they have to work with. So mammals couldn't just, like, breathe oxygen and have that, or breathe water and have that work. What I've been getting at this whole thing is the hypothetical that what if you, as a human being, could breathe underwater, like no aqualung or anything like that. Like you could just breathe in the water. Because the thing is, I know some people fear the depths, but for me, it was never really the issue of what may lurk below. It was always an issue of I don't want to drown. You know, I'm not concerned about the sharks or the squids or the piranhas or the freaking kraken. What concerns me is the fact that me personally, 30 seconds without breathing is, I mean, not even considering the exertion of like swimming. No, I need to breathe. That ain't happening. So yeah, if I could breathe underwater, I'd find it just a very interesting environment to poke around in. Granted, mind you, there are lots of other adaptations that we don't have for being underwater. Like, the lenses of our eyes are designed to compensate for the distortion of atmospheric air at average sea level, not for seeing things in the deep. Yes, knocking this off its thing was supposed to happen. Now we have one of these that we can actually move around with and play with. So put it at the slope. Because it's not like the child's going to drag it up the ladder in one hand. Right over here. A little bit more. Package delivered. Because here's the thing, it's handy now, as the child, to not have to worry about drowning, because he can now just conspicuously breathe underwater. Or perhaps he doesn't need to breathe at all. A lot of questions are stacking up without reasonable answers, but again, you're sort of encouraged to fill in the blanks for yourself. Now we have another collectible to worry about in here. I am hoping I haven't missed any. I don't think that I have, but I haven't actually been keeping track either, because I've been talking, and it's difficult to split my brain in that way. But yes, you might notice, dimly, little button up there. We're supposed to be heading for the water up there, but again, remember what I said about weird stuff with the water? You know, like the fact that now it's upside down on the ceiling? So yes, these people, whoever they are, must have tried manipulating the water to try and get it out of urban dwellings or to prevent whatever cataclysm this world has suffered. And that's another plug pulled. That weird music is playing in the background. So here we need to double our rocket-powered box flight. So we pull bottom, quickly pull top, line them up, make sure we're at the top. Yes, we have all these people whose heads are conspicuously linked to cables, and they're all pretty deformed looking. Like, that one doesn't even have a head or a leg, and it's very oddly proportioned. Okay, yeah, we're supposed to go just up. Yoink, and of course the light is meant to indicate that, hey, there's something you can interact with over here, player. Hey, look, it's an Argent energy cell. Sorry, I've been playing Doom 4. And we get cages full of the drones. Now, here's a moment which can... Because we haven't dealt with human pursuers for so long, you might have forgotten that they're a problem. If you have, and you're careless here, you end up getting pinched and then strangled to death. So we're just sliding this big crate over, because we're going to need it. And then we need to stop and chill, because there are people here again. Here's the thing. So, these drones are being, like, mind-controlled into doing stuff. Why would you put them in a cage and then forklift them somewhere if you could just mind-control them to go wherever you want them to go? There's a bit of inconsistency here in terms of, like, how the world is supposed to work and what is supposed to make sense. But the ones in the water are connected to something. We know the yellow lights somehow relate to control? And again here, we're just manipulating water. Yes, the door you come in through is a good indicator of at what point the water is low enough that you can mantle onto it from there. Yes, we need the water to be high enough that the door on the other end opens, but if it's that high, we can't jump into it because it'll be too high, hence the crate. Now we get it so high that the crate is out of the water and falls to the floor. We fill it just before the door on the other end seals. All this technology for manipulating water, and yet the world is still flooded. And in ruins. Something of interest up here. And again, more humans. Don't drop down early. Be dead before you realize you may have made a mistake. Let them do whatever it is that they're doing. Funny they just don't notice the child swimming around the water above them. I'm not sure if you'd call this raising the water or lowering it, but clearly gravity is not the cause of the water doing that, because as soon as they're out of the water, they respond to gravity as one might expect, and now we have a bunch of the deformed water people following us. And this presumably relates somehow to the plug that the water baby plugged into us. We now have some kind of otherworldly charge. You'll note one of these water people doesn't have a head. Two of them have heads that are swollen and misshapen. So here's the thing, like, you might think because their heads are hooked up that they're controlling or manipulating things, but the thing is they're still following the child like the drones normally would, so they are drones. Which suggests that the drones might be grown or gestated in the water, which again supports the synthetic people theory, that these aren't actually... Yeah, just spam control there to make sure you don't miss the button on the descent. That can very easily happen. And then, yeah, these regular drones will look like they're... I mean, that guy over there is mopping until you show up. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing, then all of a sudden they all just sort of fall in with the group. So here's a tricky one. That's a lethal fall. We can prevent it from being lethal, but the drones have to be at the bottom, which means that we need to get them down there so we get them to throw us safely across, and they'll all survive that drop. can see those guys running, so something around here interesting, fascinating is happening, because don't run unless there's a sense of urgency. What is so urgent? Do they know that we're here? We haven't been seen. So what is it that has them so, frenzied? Well, let's find out. So we landed on top of this elevator. They're still up there. But we can't leave the elevator because of the gates until it's in position, and that locks them on an upper level. But this last collectible, well, second to last, third, it's complicated. We need to split them between below the elevator and on it. We can't really do it until we get them all down from there, because they're all sort of programmed once a few of them go over to all come over. Basically, get on the elevator and then try to split this group as evenly down the middle as possible to split it into an upstairs and a downstairs. There we go. So they'll try to follow us. They'll end up on top of the elevator. Now, this particular down trip is basically just for that purpose. So we go straight back up. You might notice that yellow cord there, which, yes, again, that's intended to indicate one of the things. We get a boost down there, but we will need another boost, hence the divide. There's the weird music again. Now again, our buddies should be down there, and they should catch us. So back on the elevator, because we are supposed to get them on the elevator and then take them down. And with their help, we can pry this door open. We're clearly closing in on something big and important. Oh, got more people running. Something up ahead is... Okay, now they might have noticed we're here. Yeah, that guy's slowing down. He noticed that something was up. Remember this switch, it'll be important later. Again, more running. But it looks like there's a guy in that window, and he's just looking over here. So whatever's going on here, they're aware that this child is somehow a part of it. We got more of these weird guys, and then of course he catches sight of us and, like, stumbles so much he ends up tripping over a chair. They're all here looking at that. This is probably one of the first times we run into human beings where they're not immediately trying to kill us. They're too busy looking at whatever's going on in there. Well, what's going on in there? We need to find out. We can go up to the glass ourselves if we want, but we can't actually see anything. Well, the kid, theoretically, from his perspective, he would be able to see something. We can't, as players. But we are moving in the right direction. And this group up here is looking at it too. What is it? I mean, the child is again trying to keep a low profile, but they all seem too preoccupied with whatever's happening over there. They don't even seem to care that we're here anymore. And if we've done our work appropriately, for progression, you're meant to follow the light down to that hatch, but again, we got some yellow cables, and this ladder into shadow leads upward. (13/13). This hatch would not be open unless we'd gotten all those boxes checked. And here's where it tells you where to find that final secret, not that we didn't already see the switch. When you pull the plug on the big ball, collectible number 2 stays illuminated. I'm not sure how long it's been. It's probably been over an hour, but we are getting close to the grand finale, and it shall be very grand. This can be a little nerve-wracking because it looks like a fall you shouldn't be able to survive, but you do. Oh, I hit left control and it detached me. I didn't actually mean to do that. So we have a turbine down there that's pushing the water up, which prevents us from accessing a thing. So first thing we're supposed to do is give these a yoink. Again, there are lights and obvious red handles to indicate what we're supposed to be interacting with here. Now, to show the failure state for this and why it has to be done a certain way, that turns off the turbine, which allows us to resist the current now that it no longer exists and pull the lever for the top hatch. Trouble is, the top hatch closes almost instantly. We can't swim up to it fast enough. So what we need to do is turn the turbine back on, and while it's still getting up to speed, swim against it to reach the lever. Music, of course, kicks in because you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. Grab the latch, wait for it to open, and basically flush ourselves upside down. And there go the clothes, for some reason. Probably because it makes what's going to happen in a second make a slightly more sense. So, grab this thing, which kind of looks like the helmets, you might notice. Now, as for what the flesh blob is, and the hands are getting grabby. They're trying to grab us. 2 more to go. But on the... Whoa. But on the third, we get assimilated. We are now part of the pile. But we now control the pile. And we are now a giant blob of disassociated limbs and whatever. And basically there's no stopping us like this. Hey, look, it's that door with the lever from before. Zero subtlety with this thing. And of course the drones are still following us. Now, here's a sort of theory that I have, because yes, we have this disjointed, disassociated mass of, like, limbs and flesh. Most people consider that because of all the stuff connected to this thing, and we can still get a boost from the group, it would take a group to move this thing. Because the elevator can't even handle the weight. A lot of people... Nice stage. Wonder what this is for. I wonder if it'll become important later. Oh no, it's the cloud servers. Don't do that. Head over the top. Climb, or blorp. Bit of a mix of the two, to be honest. Oh, don't mind us. Enjoy your lunch. Nothing to be concerned about. I'm just here trampling normies. Hey, you look like a guy in charge. Bye. Yeah, he's just dead. Well, dead and kind of also part of the mass. So yeah, a lot of people consider, because this was hooked up to all those pods, that this is like some sort of controlling entity, that this is utilized in some way to manipulate the drones, which is possible, but I think that this is actually almost like a queen, because if we follow the logic that these people are synthetic, that they're produced in water or under those sorts of circumstances, perhaps they're sort of grown from this thing. Think of like a starfish, like where you cut the arm off a starfish. And not only does the starfish grow a new arm, but the arm grows a new starfish. Like, perhaps they cut sections of this mass off and they grow it into other people. And so it becomes like the progenitor mass, but you know, like in a hive, the queen. And that's why it has this power of control, because it is the genesis of this thing. Here's the thing, though. It wasn't really acting of its own volition until the child became a part of the mass, which suggests that, again, it wasn't controlling anything, but rather that now we are controlling it. Which, again, suggests that this is probably the source of the drones. That they're, like, excised or biopsied from this thing. And then basically this will grow more limbs, more, you know, torsos, more heads. And that might also explain why some of the bodies are missing parts. Like, if they're literally cutting individual, like, arms, legs, heads, and whatnot off of this thing, you would end up with bodies that are incomplete, and you'd have to stitch them onto parts that were excised at a different point. And that kind of creates the notion that that's why you end up with, like, the misshapen ones in the water. They're not finished. It's not that they've decayed, or necessarily even that they've malformed. It's just that they're being assembled from parts of this thing, and they just haven't put enough parts together for that yet. And over the sprinklers. Now, that still does raise the question as to what is actually controlling all of this, but the sort of secret ending kind of highlights that for us. I don't understand how lighting that on fire opens a door. That's zero logic there. So yes, if these bodies don't generate their own limbs, yeah, they have to cobble it together from whatever they can cut off the mass. So you have Frankenstein creatures. Handy that they marked in tape exactly where you should stop the cart to make this work. There's another odd detail, like, they are helping us now, because he's standing there with the hook. He's waiting to link it into this thing when we get over there. There was one that even opened the door for us, so what is going on here? Well, that's the thing. I think the reason everybody was sort of drawn to this thing in the room was because, don't forget that the child generates a sort of region of influence around him that attracts the drones. So as we got closer to this thing, since we are now manipulating it, it probably started to act up. And if this is very important as... Nope. Now, obviously, I'm supposed to rocket boost it into the button. Because here again, they're helping us, because for some reason now we can't pull the lever, even though we're nothing but arms, legs, and a putrid mass. Oh, are you kidding me? Alright, third time's the charm. And you can tell that suddenly we have an audience. That's an obvious trap. But there's nowhere else to go. Now, as your eyes adjust to the darkness, granted this thing, despite all of its limbs, doesn't seem to have any eyes, then again, neither does any character of this game that's not part of their model. You'll notice this gap. Technically, you can also rip off the opposite wall, but it doesn't have a grate that you can pull, so that doesn't actually do anything. So yes, we have the Queen theory, we have the... They're using this to grow the drones tidbit. The Queen theory is kind of voided by the secret ending. Because we find out exactly what is controlling this. Because if we assume that it's the child controlling this mass, we find out what is controlling the child. Because the child can't just be like everybody else, because why would they be hunting him down? Him, her, like I said, too young to tell definitively. We literally just have hair cut to go on, and that's nothing. Funny, this looks exactly like what was in that chamber. Which, like a lot of people point out, which means that technically we haven't burst through to freedom. This environment is likely also artificial, synthetic. Why a synthetic environment? Well, we saw diseased livestock, we saw a flooded environment, there's the weird water babies that try to drown you, and presumably not just you if anybody else decides to go for a leisurely dip in the open water. If you were a post-apocalypse, post-cataclysm human society, you'd kind of be down to creating an environment in a bottle to live in that would be, lavish or luxurious. That would be your option. And yes, the camera is slowly pulling back. Credits roll. Thing is, if this is an artificial environment, it's a very large one. I mean, this is Truman Show levels of, like, big, just big. I do find it odd in the Truman Show that, like, the sky is artificial because imagine the size of a structure you'd need to pull that off, right? Why not just make it the sky, right? Why not? I get that they wanted to control every aspect of the internal environment, every aspect of the character's life. And so, like, rain or shine, even day and night, they could regiment and regulate and the whole business. So you need an artificial sky for that, but that's how you end up with stuff like the stage light or the studio light falling from the sky, which kind of highlights the fact that you might be in an environment that's not entirely natural. But yeah, at this point, player inputs do nothing. I think that unless it's going to automatically boot us to menu, I think our only option is to press escape and open the menu ourselves. Oh, nope, fade to black. There we go. But again, it loops. Here we are again, back at the beginning, another cycle. Now, obviously, it'd be a little more convenient for the player to put the big secret at the first the big secret at the first one instead of the second, because we got a little bit to replay before we get to the true. I'm going to call it what is the true ending of this game. Now, the one thing that doesn't quite add up with the whole pod person thing, or like the idea of growing them from the central mass, is that why would the capsules be out here in the woods? But again, lest we forget, perhaps growing these creatures involves the trees, or perhaps, because let's not forget that we had those trees growing up through a ceiling, like the trees themselves are artificial. Maybe instead of the trees powering the people, it's the people powering the trees. I do suspect it's more likely the trees powering the people, because remember that the boy didn't gain the, like, breathe underwater thing or the remote control thing until he had a charge put into him. And what I suspect is that, in addition to being grown, these drones have to be charged, so to speak. And that might be why they're put in the pods and hooked up to the trees, that the trees are somehow being tapped for some kind of energy, and they're using that to charge the drones like you would a phone or a battery. So it's an eco-friendly power source, in the very least. Still in the woods, still with human adversaries. Here's a funny little detail. I'm recording this now because it organically ties into the ending of this, but I actually recorded this before I started playing. And then segued that into the fresh cycle or what have you. So this is actually my second time recording this particular part for this particular LP. Because, of course, I didn't know how the LP was going to go back then. So here's the thing, if they see you there, it's instant death, but they must have caught you, because that truck is the same one that parks here, and has its eye out for you, that you end up getting busted. Because that's what doesn't make sense. If... Lousy shot. Now again, we can ignore the first secret because it's done. I find it funny that the truck is facing this way, and it looks like you can see them start to pull forward, and yet we don't encounter them as we cross the street here. It's possible that they're just going to turn around. Maybe they have more work to do at the pods, or they're trying to avoid this farm area, because there's no signs of human life there, and considering the condition of the livestock, it's possible that they might be infected, or whatever, by exposure. Which actually creates an interesting connotation for the worms infecting the livestock. Perhaps the mass, the sort of big thing we assimilate into at the end, was actually created from those worms. Because we can handle the worms and the livestock, and we are unaffected by either. I am hitting control, right? Is this not the clearing? Where's the thing? Grab it. Nope. Like I said, this one's a little insidious. It's a little too well hidden. Found it flawlessly that first time. That's too far, because that's out of this whole area. I mean, it's here, isn't it? Oh, no, there it is. I see it. Oh, it's already open. When did I open it? So if memory serves, up, right, left, right, up, right, left. And it opens. Yes, it gets dark in here. It's supposed to get dark. Pretty long run, too. I mean, if the farm wasn't such a sort of long environment, I'd say that this puts us under the city, which technically would make somewhat more sense. I'm guessing, though, they didn't want to make it that long of a run, because then you'd be down here forever just running around the dark. Like, is this secret tunnel ever going to end? But they definitely give the impression of distance travel. Takes a while to get to the end of this thing. So, the boy controls the mass, but who controls the boy? Is the boy a free agent? No. Because you'll notice over there a bunch of computers. They're linked to a helmet. At the other end of this room, you have a grate and a cable linking into that entire mess. Now, when we pull the cable, the boy goes into a standby state. The boy is a drone. Or the child. The child is a drone. So in-universe, either the computers were controlling the child, or because that was like, it had a chair, it had a bunch of computers set up, the implication is that it's kind of a meta joke. Well, maybe not a joke, but it's kind of a meta contextual thing. The child controls the mass at the end, as well as the drones and so forth, but the question on everybody's mind then is who controls the child? Well, it's you, dummy, the player. You were controlling the child. Now, how do you factor into this situation? You're playing the game. And yes, I know that some people cannot handle a fourth wall break of that magnitude, but again, that's just one of the ways of interpreting it. You could also interpret it that the computers were controlling the child, and that maybe it was an AI, like a rogue AI, that was acting on its own, and that's why they're trying to stop the child, because he's a drone, but he's off script. He's doing something he's not supposed to be doing. And maybe that's what's controlling all of the other drones, is, different AIs or computers, because that's the thing. If you're growing people, or Frankensteining them together from this mass, if you're doing that, however, whatever it is you're doing, how would you control them? Because if you're going to put a person in a chair and then have them puppet the drone, what's the point? Why not just get the person to do what the drone is going to have to do? The only reason to have a person operate by remote like that is if it's in some sort of hazardous environment, but most of the time, we see the drones operating near people. So if you're not going to get humans to do it, the logical answer then would be you have a computer control your meat drones to do menial work. Move these mine carts, carry these crates, mop these floors. And presumably the reason why you create these synthetic people in the first place is because, again, this is an apocalyptic world. There's been a great cataclysm. There's signs of blight and disease in the livestock of the farm we go into. You would need... Because the thing is, the pods hooked into the trees. If we follow the logic that the pods are drawing power from the trees and have drones in them, the drones are being powered by the pods, which in turn are drawing their energy from the trees. Now, this means that drones, theoretically, can be powered by trees. Just patch them into nature. Humans require complex diets, which means livestock crops, which, like I said, there's signs of blight, so no crops. There's disease infecting the livestock, so none of that. And whatever you do have, you have a limited amount to go around. And if your infrastructure to sustain the people you have requires more maintenance or more work than you have people to do it, you need an out. You need some technological solution. The synthetic people, the pod people, the drones, they do work and consume a resource that human beings, in the very least, don't need. We don't need to plug ourselves into trees, and aside from like apple trees or other specific fruit-bearing trees, we can't really derive sustenance from them either. So it's a resource that still exists, that's going spare, that we can use to power these people to do menial work. And critically, well, you have this big, hypothetically in my case, at least in terms of how I theorized it, nuclear power joint that's doing its thing over yonder. The big shockwave generator. What do you need that for? Well, if these things are being controlled by computers, like an AI or even just basic programming on a computer somewhere that's controlling them, that needs power. Like, not plugged into a tree power. That needs some more direct power. There's a big reactor feature in the game. So That's my interpretation of this world from the evidence provided. I'm not going to reiterate that because this video is already going to be longer than I usually post, and I'm not making it any shorter by going on like this. I just wanted to clarify, based on the what we're shown, the environmental storytelling, which is certainly there, based on the evidence that we're shown, that's my conclusion for how this is all supposed to, work. I have been Nexon. I'm not sure if this would be found to be particularly Halloweeny, but Doom 4 ended early, despite me taking almost a week off, so I needed to fill the air. Thank you all so much for watching in one of my wordiest Let's Plays ever! I still have to play Limbo, but I don't actually know where all the secrets are, so if I play that, it's not going to be as informative as this one. If I do play it, it will have aired before this one, which makes me pointing this out redundant. I'm rambling. I'm going to shut up now. Bye. Oh, wait. Outro. Fairly well. Short, super short version. Fairly well.